if not, if
How
there's
you
something
started.
else.
I was wondering if you could
Just
talk
wondering
more.
a little bit about that.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joshua Moore, and I'm a programmer for the Jewish Film Institute. And for those of you that are not familiar, the Jewish Film Institute, or better known as JFI, we're the presenter of the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival. And we are entering our 38th year this summer in 2018. So we are late July through mid-August. I hope you can join us for our annual festival. But tonight's program is a very unique program. It's called Talk Amongst Yourselves. And what this is a combination of you live here, and we have an online audience that is joining us as well. So I would like to welcome both everyone here and our online audience that's following us. And they're using a platform called OV. It's OVEE. And this was developed by ITVS. It's kind of like a social screening room. And they're following everything that's happening here, and they're talking amongst themselves and writing questions. And then we're going to actually answer some of their questions later in the program. So, so that's how this works. And then today's program, I guess we could call it kind of a multimedia presentation, exploring storytelling as a tool to understand today's refugee crisis and the people it affects. We also have panelists with us and filmmakers, so they'll be joining us momentarily. And I have a few thank yous to list now. So if you could hold your applause until the end of the list, that would be great, because there's quite a few people to give thanks to. Our co-presenters are Citizen Film, the Contemporary Jewish Museum, and the Magnes Collection of Jewish Art and Life, and our educational resource provider, the Jewish Learning Works, and generous support from our sponsors, Artworks, the Covenant Foundation, the Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Fund, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And our community partners are Keshet, Congregation Beth Shalom, Young Adult Division of the Jewish Community Federation, Bechol Lashon, the Center for the Jewish Studies at UC Berkeley, Jewish Family and Community Services East Bay, Frameline, JCC East Bay, KQED Film School Shorts, and KQED Truly California, HIAS. And then I'd also like to thank the JFI staff and our Commander-in-Chief on the technical side tonight, Mr. Rob Thomas. All right, so on with the show. So the program tonight, under the banner of Talk Amongst Yourselves, is What We Carry With Us, a Refugee StoryLab. And this explores the lives of refugees through objects they've chosen to curate. The result are empathy-driven creative works, which the viewer asks, what would it be like to flee your home and search for a new one? So with that, we're going to watch some of the films, and then we're going to have the panelists join us. So let's take a look at the film.
My neighbor in Syria, he was making many stuff out of silver, and he made this for me 1 year before the war. He wrote my first name in Arabic on the top, and when you open this heart, you will find my last name inside. And this means a lot to me because I loved my neighbors. They were like family for us. Yeah, it represents to me love, home, family, friends, fun, all these things that I am missing now. I remember it when I look at this.
The bowl
was a wedding present that my parents got when they married in 1930. My father left in April of 1938. He had been the last Jewish doctor in Germany to treat a general patient body, and it was illegal by then. He had to finally leave. You couldn't bring anything with you to speak of. But the one thing my mother insisted on bringing was this wedding present. So I remember this. She packed it in a hat box, and we schlepped it along as we went up to Bremerhaven to get on the ship, carrying it very carefully. I don't want this object to be forgotten. It serves our banana bowl in the kitchen, and I look at it every day, and every day it's a memory.
This outfit is really valuable for me. It's Afghani custom, and it reminds me of my culture. Back home, Afghanistan, we have Eid. It's like Christmas. And Eid, we used to wear those clothing and I hang out with my cousins, and I really miss those days. I remember once I wear it in here in America, and everybody were looking at me so kind of like, what the hell you wearing? Like whenever I wear this clothing and people, they think that I'm a terrorist. I don't know why they're thinking that way.
My name is Mariam, and I'm from Afghanistan. There's a lot of memories that I have brought with myself here, but one of the most important was money of Pakistan. I have complicated memories because in Pakistan we were living as a refugee, and then it was really hard for refugees to work there. It just reminds me of my childhood and all the government politics. I want to go back and change what is unfair to people. If it's Afghani people or Pakistani people, I just want to help.
My name is Zander. I'm from Uganda and I'm 25 years old. In 2013, Uganda passed a bill against LGBTIs. Every LGBT in Uganda is going to be life imprisoned or killed. My friend Semujo, he was stoned while I was watching. My mom said that you could be the next and I don't want to bury you. I brought my small backpack. I brought my few clothes. I brought my phone, which had some Ugandan music. I came with Semuju's photo. He was my good guy. He was my good partner. I went to the bus station. Where are you going? I said, let me just pick Kenya. I cried on the way. To give me inspiration and courage, I put on my headsets. There's a song that I used to listen to when I was still with my mom and my dad. Maria Tombonya Bonya. Music is like your mom. Even if your minds are feeling upsetted, music makes you to feel comfortable. From Nairobi, I went to a refugee camp in northwestern Kenya. I said, now they have brought me to another hell. This is another hell. But caseworker told me, we are going to give you other fellow LGBTIs who are here. That's when I got Charis, I got Leah, I got ashamed. I lived in the refugee camp for almost 2 years. I made the bracelets with my friends to remember that I've been in the camp, I'm a refugee, I'm a gay. I can't hide it. I was hoping that I'm going to America, and when I found out, I bought the American shirt because I said, if the country has allowed me to go there and I'm a gay, it means that there is freedom. It's a good country. You can become whatever that you want. You have to work hard. You pay your rent, you pay taxes, you pay your dues. At first, when I came, I had a fear still. What if someone comes to me? Oh, you okay? What inspired me? I went to Castro. I said, life is there. So, life is existing. Our life is existing. I call Castro. I call it Land of Opportunity Castro Part 2. That's what I call it. This is freedom. You can do whatever that you want to do. Here in Castro, you can even walk when you are naked.
In life, love is the best free God gave to humans.
Now I don't hide. I wear white clothes because I want to be seen. When I put on the golden shoes, the golden magic shoes, they're looking at me and I feel proud. I feel proud. In America, I came back to life. I came back to life.
All right, I'd like to welcome our panelists. First, we have filmmaker and co-founder and the director of Citizen Film, Sam Ball. Come on up, Sam. Next, we have Zander Berkeley Liberty, who you just saw in the film. Zander is a recent refugee settling in the Bay Area from Kenya. Welcome. And next we have Richard Buxbaum. And Richard is also a subject in the film and a professor at UC Berkeley specializing in international law. Welcome, Richard. And last but certainly not least, we have the curator of the Magnes Collection of Jewish Art and Life and an adjunct professor in the Department of Music at University of California, Berkeley, and he's already on the stage. Welcome, Francesco Spagnolo. All right, let's have a seat. So Sam, let's start with you. Put this whole program kind of into context for us about how you started it, how it came to be, and what your intentions were.
Yeah, so a word about our company, Citizen Film. We're a nonprofit based here in San Francisco, and we try and create work that challenges people to think about pressing issues of the day, to have dialogue about those issues, and to take action on those issues. And we also are constantly on the lookout for really cool people to work with doing cool things. And I had come across an exhibit that Francesco designed with a painter here at the Contemporary Jewish Museum and really liked it. And Francesco and I started talking about things that we were interested in, things that the museum was working on.
Sorry about that.
There goes my mic.
Here. You said my name too many times, that's what happened.
Francesco has a very loud presence and a lot of feedback. He gives a lot of feedback.
No pun intended.
So we started talking, and we were both very interested in what was going on in terms of migration, and we kind of hatched this idea that was aligned with a couple of things that the museum was working on and a couple of things that we had been thinking about at Citizen Film in response to the refugee crisis.
And Francesco, describe your role in a little bit more detail for us all.
Well, so first of all, I am the curator of the Magnes Collection at UC Berkeley, 17,000 memory objects from all over the Jewish world. We research them, we work with them with students, and I'm very fortunate because I teach UC Berkeley students who are very interesting global people, and I teach with this collection. So I teach them how to be near objects and to think about their broader implications. In this case, I actually received a pretty good grant from the university to develop a new course that's called Mapping Diasporas as part of an initiative called Digital Humanities at Berkeley. And the idea was to think about, so, estimates say that about 1/7 of the world population is currently in movement, in some kind of transition. That's a lot. And I was really thinking about the role of objects of material culture in this movement of people and cultures. And so put together a class of 20-something students to study objects and think more broadly about what the consequences of people moving and what memory objects narrate about their lives and about cultures in general. But before I taught the class, I actually, I took seriously the grant that was given to me that said, as a grant to also plan the class. And so to do that, I created a working group, and I invited Sam to join after we had first made contact. And it was a working group that included professors, students, web designers, all kinds of people. And sort of the conversation with Sam developed so that while I was teaching the class, and this was exactly a year ago, I think the first meeting we had with Richard, with Zander and others was at the beginning of November, so it was like election week of 2016, a pretty interesting time in our collective lives. We decided to invite refugees to class. I added to the mix my dear friend, colleague, Richard Buxbaum, who came as a mentor to us all. We had collaborated on a different project previously on the history of intellectual migration to UC Berkeley about half a century ago. So it was a different idea, but it felt like a natural partner to me. The refugees we invited to class were all the same age as the students. And I would say probably the one innovative twist there was that we invited everyone to bring one or more memory objects. You see them profiled in the documentaries. And then our students learned with Sam and his team and with me also how to conduct interviews. And by the end of the semester, interviews were done with all of the refugees, and now all the work in producing documentaries.
And how did you find all of your subjects?
Well, we worked in partnership, but maybe Sam, you want to say more about who you partner with to sort of.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out first of all to Jewish Family and Community Services of the East Bay, which operates a refugee resettlement program, and Zander can speak a little bit more about his experience, and a couple of other agencies that are doing resettlement work in the Bay Area. And we wanted to find people who would be good collaborators on this project because, first of all, they had something they wanted to bring to it. These can be very challenging stories to tell, so we wanted to make sure that we were working with people for whom this would be an empowering process. And as Francesco mentioned, everybody's very young, so part of our goal was to kind of help bring some of our expertise in communicating with an audience to help people who were kind of at that point in their life and in their resettlement where they wanted to share with the idea of, and what had happened to them being known so that it would happen to fewer people in the future.
So Zander, thank you so much for being here with us and for letting yourself be so vulnerable. I know that that these are difficult stories to tell, and thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience, meeting Sam and Francesco, and what it was that really made you decide that now is time to tell my story?
I think it's like, hey guys, can you hear me now? All right. So, I was trying to say that I had a fear still. So, by the time when Sam Bor and his cabinet and Mike Swaka, when they let me know that can you do an interview about your objects that you carried from Uganda, Kenya, up to US. At first, I wasn't like feeling comfortable about it because I was thinking, even I can get more problems. I can create more problems in my life. So when I met them at first and I met some students, what came into my mind by that time?
It's not you.
Oh, all right. So what came into my mind, I say that these students, they are taking different courses. How comes that I'm a refugee? They want to know what brought me here. They want to study the life of refugees who are LGBT. This is not part of their subject. That's what was in my mind. But, I started feeling a little bit nervous. How comes that a student is asking me questions? This is not part of their subjects. That's what I know. So, and after all, in the meantime, I started feeling comfortable because I had more refugees who were surrounding me. That's why by today, when I came here, I asked Sam that my friends are not coming because I wasn't feeling comfortable because I'm the only refugee and him. So, and I feel like, it's okay as long as I've been in US for so long. Now I'm feeling like, life is a little bit okay, a little. So they asked me some questions. Why are you here? Do you got some objects that you carried? I had a lot of so many objects because I wanted reminders. Because whenever I leave a home, some people don't carry anything. Some people have been in war. Some people are struggling a lot. They don't carry anything. But at least for me, I manage to carry some stuffs, like these objects that they are trying to talk about. The bracelets, whatever, the map of Africa, America, because I was so proud to come in America. And I'm really even feeling very, very happy. I don't know. So some asked me a lot of questions, and the students, why did you make the bracelets? Why did you came with the map? What? The eagle? I forgot the eagle. So they bought eagle and the bandanas. So I just feel like it's okay with me, and I explained to them each and every kind of
And we wanted to talk about, as Francesco says, memory objects that triggered memory, but not necessarily that were brought from home or stuffed in a backpack hastily, as some things were, but we wanted to invite people to be more expansive in the way they thought about things. So the bald eagle Zander's referring to is a bandana that he bought at the commissary in a refugee camp. And it was very interesting because, as Francesco said, we started this right before the election, like maybe a day or two before. And a lot of the objects that Zander had chosen were American objects. He was so excited that he got this visa to America that he chose, as you saw in the film, an American shirt. And there were several other objects, the bracelet too, that have American iconography on them.
So I'm curious, Richard, can you tell us a little bit about how your experience with someone like Zander, the generation gap between you two, and how that's differed from your experience?
Well, I was younger than Zander when I got here, so that's one. That's one. I was 9 years old. What bonds me in a way to him and the others is simply the fact that well over a half century I have been teaching at Cal, and of course have come across wave after wave after wave of, you might say, new Americans, you might just say people whose faces had not been familiar in our halls, right, even though they were Americans. By the way, I was the first to teach immigration law at Cal in the 60s. So I've always had this particular connection, in part, of course, because I came out of that same situation. Questions?
I wanted to just look and see if we had any questions from our online audience. No questions yet. I guess they're being very shy. So yeah, let's move on. You want to talk about the Times Square project?
Sure. So we're constantly looking to build partnerships and to create ways in for audiences. We felt like it was important to take this work that we've been doing with students, some of whom are refugees, some of whom are not, and share it with a much wider audience. And we partnered with our friends at Shared Studios and at Times Square Arts in New York to create a multimedia exhibition on Times Square on Broadway Plaza. And since we had been working with objects, we thought it would be interesting to sort of subvert that environment, which is about selling you objects as lifestyles, and work with the young people to kind of forge these public identities in those surroundings that would fit with those surroundings. And maybe we can show you a little clip.
Yeah, let's watch it.
Oh, and are we watching the 1 minute clip first?
I believe so,
okay.
Yes.
So I'll give you a little more context. So outside a shipping container, we had video ads, and inside the shipping container, every half hour, we showed a short film program, and then 8 people at a time walked into the shipping container to view a film and then chat with one of the participants in the project or more, and either Francesco or I would take turns moderating.
All right, let's roll it.
The Islamophobia is a big issue. I don't know why they're thinking that way.
All of us, we came under UN, United Nations.
You guys are some of the bravest people that I've come in contact with.
It's nice to meet you.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Amazing stuff. I can imagine you had quite a blend of people coming into this exhibit. Tell us maybe some of the more interesting experiences you had with probably a very diverse group of people coming to look.
Yeah. So this is on Broadway Plaza, and you have to have a half hour to kill because the programs were a half hour each. Times Square is interesting because it's truly a crossroads of the entire world. You have people from red states, blue states, countries all over. The people who tend to have half an hour on their hands tend to be tourists who are there early for a Broadway show. And that leads to really interesting mixes of people. So we had one of my favorite sets of 8 people. We had an evangelical couple from Tennessee, white evangelicals. We had an African-American man who was in town for a conference. And we had a gay couple from Greece who had a lot of Syrian refugees in their town and were curious because that particular program was featuring a Syrian refugee. And you got these really interesting discussions, not just with Zander and his cohort, but also people sort of talking to one another about how they feel about the refugee situation, and of course that expanded to bigger topics.
What was fascinating was the sort of the randomness, as you were saying, of the participants, but at the same time the deep connection that both the space and I think the topic really created. So there was a sense of familiarity, even though it was a random and fleeting connection that was being expressed there. Part of this seems to be, at least in the conversations we've had also in class and beyond, because of the evocative power of objects themselves. Rather than asking somebody to tell a narrative of trauma, we're focusing on these material possessions and what they mean. And you know, I think the first kind of exercise we did in class was actually we sat in a circle and each participant presented their objects and then passed them around. So we all held them, touched them. Note that my students were actually also, as part of the course, they were trained in handling museum objects, so they knew how to treat these objects right. But also it was interesting to see the range of objects that were involved. In Richard's generation, a lot of photographs. And then, as he was discussing in the clip at the opening, this fruit bowl, which now, and I know how important it is because I asked what your secret is, because he is a man of many precious secrets, and he says every morning I eat a banana with a squeezed lime on top. So when he says that it's his banana bowl, it really means that it's an integral part of his routine, of his daily routine, and at the same time it's an object that goes back generations and that was probably the only object that your parents were able to extract from their home and bring to America. Zander, with the objects that he fabricated, and he told us about all the codes that the bracelets mean to him, and that was one of the conversations we had in the container, in the portal, was how the different bracelets were used by different refugees to identify one another and their origins, what camps they went through, etc. So an unspoken language and bond among individuals. Money, bills from Pakistan by Mariam, whose family was impoverished. So that money, which means very little in American dollars, meant a lot to them because it was not just a lifeline, but a sense of dignity. And clothes that were mailed from Afghanistan to America, to Shaheen, who then wears them, but then people look at him as if he's a terrorist or if a weirdo, at least, going around the Bay Area wearing those traditional clothes. But one thing that actually, and in a way links to the photographs that Richard showed us, is in this generation, all of these migrants and refugees carry smartphones with them. And their smartphones have photographs of their homes, of their friends, and also, which was fascinating to me also as a musicologist, music playlists. So music that carries feelings. So there is a lot about carrying feelings here, and these feelings carry from one person to another. So our experience in the portal, I think, actually attested to that type of human connection that's very deep.
What about the object of the shipping container itself? What role do you think that played in people's experience? Did you see more empathy coming from people once they were in that container and in that physical space?
Yeah. I want to say one more thing about the object first, which is that it gives people license, I think, to ask questions. You know, when somebody's been through something very traumatic, there's a very, I think, healthy reticence about, how much, as Zander was saying, these are hard things to talk about, so how much does this person want to share? But, when I say, oh, your bracelet, did you make that? It just changes the conversation. It makes it both bearable in a way, and creates real exchange, because then people can relate because they might have a bracelet that they made. So we experienced a lot of that inside the container. And I think the object itself, it's a really brilliant metaphor because it's so simple. So our friend has been using these shipping containers to create two-way communication for a number of years, it's a way to create some intimacy across space, I think, because you're completely focused on one another through the technology.
So one of our online viewers has a question. What questions did people ask in the portal? Maybe you have some examples.
Yeah, I'd like to share a question Zander asked after a lot of people were talking to him about his object. He asked the group, well, I know my story is probably very different from yours, but what is it that you can relate to? Do you remember that, Zander?
I do. I think there is a question which challenged me a lot in my life. They told me, do you contact your family? So, because I realized that some refugees, they normally come here, not only refugees and also immigrants. Some people, they do contact their family relatives. But I, myself, I don't contact anyone. What I told them that I do contact one person in my life ever since I came. That is my uncle. And another question, it was, where do you see your future in the US? Where do you think you will be? What I said is that even in the video, I was trying to talk about it. Here in the US, you gotta work hard. Just continue working. And I have another say, which goes like this. Don't work hard, but just work smart in the US. You will overcome each and every situation in this country, no matter what comes in your life. Another question was, ever since you came in the US, which are like, okay, tell us one of your favorite job that you ever done in the US, and you feel like, oh, I like this job. Because I know, for us, we don't have this education, we don't have this edutainment. We gotta do each and every job that we see in our lives. That's why I say, don't work hard, but just work smart, and you pay your dues and taxes. So, my job was at the San Leandro Hospital. I was working as a security, working at the front desk. That was my best job. And the one that I'm doing right now is also the second job in the US. I don't like working hard, I just like work smart. Another one, I do work at the airport. I'm working for FedEx. Still, I'm sitting down. I'm just working smart, I'm not working hard. That's all. Another question they asked me?
Let me add a postscript to exactly that comment. This was during World War II, and I must have been about 15. And I was working on a county road gang, because most of the adults, men were drafted. And it was hard work. It was terrible work. You had these post-hole diggers that you had to plunge down, then separate as your hands came up. Miserable, right? So I was home one day, and it was so awful. My hands were trembling as I tried to get a glass of water. And my father walked into the kitchen, and saw me, and he just said, Manfred, my actual first name, you know, there are only two kinds of jobs in this world. I didn't know what he was getting at. Oh, yeah, he said, there are stand-up jobs and sit-down jobs. Believe me, I went for the sit-down job from then on.
Yeah, that's what I like. That's what I like. That's what I like in US. So, and the good thing about this country, okay, I won't talk about that. The good thing about this country is like here in the US, what matters is your edutainment. What matters is your edutainment. They don't care who you are, but what they care about you, how is your education? How are your qualifications? They will give you a job. But once you do your dirty stuffs, whatever, your mistakes, they will let you go. But the good thing about them, they give you jobs. That's the good thing about your country. They give people jobs, don't like in our country, Africa. And they don't want to know, even if you are LGBT, as long as you are qualified for the job, you got some experience, they will give you a job. You can survive in the US. But in Africa, it's not like that. But in Africa, if you are a gay, like last week I roast my friend. They poured, no, not last week, 1 month now. They poured an acid on his whole body and they strangled him and up to death, whatever. So, because they don't like him and he was always in showbiz, you see. But in the US, I never saw an LGBT being killed. I know, but back in 90s, whatever, in San Francisco, I had that guys who fought for LGBTs, they were killed. But right now, they don't kill them, which means that each and every job you want to do in the US, they don't care who you are, they don't care your gender, what are your qualifications, experience. They'll give you a job even if you are an LGBT. That's all.
So let's take another question from the online audience. They're asking, what impact has this project had on refugees? How has it changed their experiences on integrating?
Well, probably an interesting, 2 points maybe. One is, again, this conversation about objects, which is not direct at trauma, but more at memory and at sharing, seems to allow the partners we've had to really have a voice. And also to meet other students, same age, and be heard. So not just have a voice, but learn how to be heard. And the other is, for instance, one of the participants, through this experience, is changing her plan of action with her education and wants to go towards law and thinks about empowering others who are in a disempowered position. So I don't know whether it's, what will happen with that, but the idea that there's possibilities to be explored and conversations to be had that are not being had, I think that's a key point here. But again, it's all about the many, many stories that we're constantly surrounded with, all the encounters we may have every time we go out the door and run into people or take the subway or something, and we don't have. So it's about thinking about what's actually going on around us, and it's all about awareness, both in terms of our guests in the classroom or in the films and all of us.
And how are you following up with everyone that you met with? I'm imagining there are many that didn't even make it into the films. Are you continuing relationships with them? What has that process been like?
Well, we were very intentional about choosing a group of people that we wanted to continue working with. And our hope, as you know, running an arts nonprofit, we kind of are constantly moving through money, moving through grants to get things done in a phased way. And but we've continued doing events, and as you saw, in Times Square, we did an event in the East Bay. We're doing an event here. We'll continue doing events and collaborating and finding ways to onboard new people, God willing, as well as the current cohort for as long as they choose to continue participating.
It's also kind of interesting to see how a project that's incubated inside a classroom has all kinds of ripple effects and to take sort of your idea, develop in a classroom to Times Square in a portal. It's interesting, and yay for public education too, no?
So I have a question for each of you. Kind of what changed in your own thoughts about the current refugee crisis before going into this project and after going through it? What did you learn that you didn't know before?
Well, as I said, I have had so many waves of refugee, well, refugee may be overstating it, but at least let's say people who had to leave either economically or politically or for ethnic, religious reasons, that I've always been, in that sense, engaged with that community. So the thing that helps, that my own background helped with is that I cannot, how shall I put this? I can't relativize other people's experiences. For each person, those experiences are absolute experiences. They shape their lives. Right? And I appreciate that more and more as we get different types of people, some of whom, as Zander, basically had to flee, right? Others who left looking for a better life, right? Others who came basically against their will. Right? They would have preferred to stay in a stable Syria, let's say. Right? So, you know, there is this old argument that there's nothing as, there's only one Holocaust. There's, you know, don't talk to me about your little Holocaust, right? Well, that's one thing that has really been, I've never felt that, but it has really been driven out of my gut, so to say, by the experience of these 30, 40 years of the most recent period.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think it's like nowadays the life of refugees and the migrants is the same. Because according to what I see on the news, what is happening in Africa, especially in Libya, I feel like we are experiencing the same life. I think nowadays some countries are not like, as in like, I don't know, because this is the great country which normally take care of different countries to help them from situations that they face. But ever since the leadership changed, I don't see any change of like helping more refugees. And I see it on the news, our president is trying as in like to let more refugees to come, like, you know, before he never wanted it. But I'm seeing that we are living in the same situation now. Because migrants and refugees, it's like we are the same. And I was trying to talk to some of our refugees who are in Kenya, who are my friends, and they are LGBT and non-LGBT. I was very excited and very happy to hear that U.S. has allowed some of the refugees to come in the U.S. But it's not like before. Before, during the Obama, the Obamas, whatever, those guys, they used to allow refugees to come. But right now, I don't want to talk about the president. Right now, we don't have refugees who are coming. We do have, but it's not like the way we used to have it before. People are trying to say that, do you know that we gotta die here? Now I'm 35 years old. I came in the camp when I was 19. That's what my friends are trying to say. Others are trying to say that I came in the refugee camp when I was 25 or 30. Now I'm 39. You see, people have been in the camp for so long. So life is not good at all. It's not good. Because last week I heard that some refugees, they are dying of HIV because they got no food. Food that they are giving to them is not enough nowadays, because not only LGBT, but all of refugees in the entire world, they are trying to say that food is not enough for all of us, you know. But for us who are here, we are trying as in like to help some of our refugees who are still there. For me, I help LGBT and non-LGBT. I don't care who you are, because we face the same situation. I know that situation is not good at all. So, that's all.
Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that was reinforced for me in an interesting way is some of what Zander said about America, we heard from every single participant in the project, that this kind of sense that this is a place where if you work hard, first of all, that there is an opportunity to study and to work hard and to advance, that was so ingrained in people that I think that's kind of a sense of national identity that's going to be very hard to entirely rip out of us. This sense that achievement is there for anybody to take, and that as a society, that's something that we value. So that was a very interesting aspect of working with Zander and his cohort for me.
Have those thoughts changed since the election, though?
Well, we started this project really days before the election, so most of our work on it has been post-election.
Okay.
And no, I've found that, you know, the same kind of ambivalence that Zander just expressed, not, you know, in a kind of blind Pollyannish way, but just this sense of idealism about what this country can be. And what I was asking Zander about before, I'll just, you know, tell you guys, he turned the question around the audience and said, well, what does my story make you think about? And almost everybody in that shipping container on Broadway Plaza, New York said, my grandparents, or a great-grandparent, or a great-great-grandparent. And they said, you know, even though some of them had had some traumatic experiences, nothing to the degree of what Zander experienced, but this sense of being forced to leave somewhere and coming to the United States and making this country their own. They really got that about Zander's story and could think back to a parent, a grandparent, a great-grandparent. So I thought that was a great question and an interesting set of answers.
So when I was about 12, I traveled internationally for the first time by myself. It wasn't a long trip. I was just going from Italy to France. But before I left, my grandmother lectured me and described to me how to fabricate a makeshift money belt, and made me really paranoid, so that for years afterwards, every time I crossed the border, I was really paranoid, but explained to me how I had to keep my belongings tight and to be aware of this and that, etc. And after she passed away, my mother and I were going through her belongings, and we found this, a memory object. So this was my grandmother's money belt that she wore when she was 27 years old, and together with 3 small kids. Richard, you can hold it. You can be my co-curator here. And that she fabricated for herself when they were smuggled across the Swiss border to safety after being hunted down by Italian fascists. And so when I saw this, I immediately understood what it was and what she was trying to teach me when I was a little kid. So I'm bringing this today because I think many of us have memory objects. As you were saying, many people that we interacted with were reminded of their parents and grandparents. This is a country, I'm an immigrant to this country, it's a country of immigrants deep down, and it's very important to keep that in mind. But I would say, you know, at least for me, entering this project, I mean, Sam and I were talking about this, and I was preparing this project long before the elections, and I think these concerns go well beyond anything that's happening and that's in the news cycle these days. These are broad human concerns about how people move, relocate, and how they communicate with one another. So that resonates with our students a lot, and that's great because they are, you know, in charge of our future. So.
Yeah, we're almost out of time, unfortunately, but Richard, do you have a final thought?
I was only going to add one thing to that. The old story in the 30s was the boat is full. That was a mantra, right? Now, given where we are today, with the percentages that you yourself said of involuntarily moved people, right? Given what's coming up ecologically speaking, right? It's going to be very, very hard to fight and organize against the concept of the boat is full. Right? It's a dilemma in any event. I mean, I'm not going to say that, you know, we know the answer, but I do know that we are at the moment in a trend towards using that as an excuse to turn our back on the world. And if any one thing, I think, is going to test us in the next half century, right, it's going to be that issue. When you think of the ecological, the warming, the water, quite apart from the human caused, of course themselves epiphenomenal.
So I would love to keep talking. This is there's so much more to say, obviously, but we do have to end this soon. I just wanted to thank everyone again so much for your project. I mean, I think the world could use a lot more empathy and to create such, meaningful artwork that allows those conversations to happen and for people to look at the refugee crisis in a new way. And especially through personal objects, I think it's just something that people take for granted sometimes. So thank you again so much for being here, and thank you to all of you.